So for those of you who don't know me, I'm an equine lifestyle photographer. I've been one for 15 years. You'll see me here holding a Canon, but I'm actually Nikon now, so I did the switch. I know. I took the switch about 3 years ago, and yeah, it changed my life, actually. It really did change my life. I am now, yeah, sorry, Canon users, sorry.
I think there's a few not muted.
Oh, okay. I'll leave that up to you guys to...
No, we mute everybody because otherwise you get reverb and everything else.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Also, I know this crowd, they won't shut up.
Sorry, they're just discussing this wonderful presentation. So right now, I am now exclusively portraiture. So I am commissioned privately by my clients all over the world, and I photograph them with their horses at home. But I did start my life as an equine photographer. I had a best friend who I used to go to all of his events with, as well as grooming. I would have my camera, but I found very quickly that I always wanted to capture the behind the scenes, the nitty gritty, the hard work that really goes into it. So when I wanted to do that professionally, I actually created a personal project. Rather than trying to tackle the sidelines with all the other event photographers, my confidence wasn't very high at all. And the way I came around that was to do something a bit different. And I knew I wanted to carve my own slice of this cake and be a bit different. I've always taken a harder route. If there's a long way route, I will take it. So I created a personal project. I contacted Harry Mead, who's on the Olympic team. And I wanted to be part of the Harry Mead team, but on a very separate basis. And it was to create a story with that team and capture all the behind the scenes, everything from the yard and the training and his owners and his family and the team and the horses, all the way through to the action with the cross country, show jumping and the dressage. But ultimately, the reason to work with Harry was for the personal project and of course, to build a wonderful network. The network also included magazine sponsors, owners, journalists, brands, and other riders who trusted Harry. So this evening, I just want to go over how you can create being different, creating the difference in what you're producing at events, how you're going to build value, building collaborations and a network, marketing yourself, which obviously everyone knows is actually the hardest bit. And we've got to be marketing ninjas nowadays to actually achieve anything. How to get paid being an event photographer, be the expert, and the dreaded accreditation, which is going pro. I'm sure all of you here this evening have gone through the accreditation process, and I would imagine that most of you have achieved that because it's not as scary and not as hard as one thinks before you get into it. But there are obviously rules and regulations, and we have to follow them. So just interrupt me and do slow me down if I'm going too fast. So creating the difference. First of all, what do you want to do? So if you think about your photography life, do you niche down into a discipline? Have you thought about maybe only doing dressage or show jumping or eventing or racing? Maybe you only want to work with one rider. Maybe you want to work with certain types of brands, or maybe you want to work with one magazine. But I will say that the more you niche down, the more of the expert you look. If you know horses, that makes you an expert. If you know photography, that makes you an expert. If you have experience in a certain discipline, that makes you an expert. One of the things I'm an expert in is people and horses and eventing. So I put those three things together and I needed to push forward what makes me the expert. So although I was there as a photographer, I was also able to help and handle the horses, help the grooms, and also chat to the owners and make them feel included in what I was producing, what I was creating. So you need to figure out what's your concept. So it might be that you do want to photograph show jumping, but maybe you want to take it on a more creative route. Maybe all the images are going to be produced into black and white. Maybe you're going to choose a different position in show jumping than any other photographer, but you need your thing, you need your concept. What makes you stand out? What makes you get noticed by your clients? Because you need to build the value. They need to know your name and what that offers and what that shows. And they ought to know, if you're building value into your images and into what you're creating, you should be the only one that they can get those images from. So if you take this image of Harry here wearing his United Kingdom hat, and obviously I photographed his Land Rover bib, but this is because I was behind the scenes with him at the lorry, whereas it's unusual to get that type of shot when he's on a horse and he's concentrating and he's warming up and that sort of thing, which is why I wanted to be stationed at the lorry and capturing the behind the scenes. Any questions before I move on?
I think I've dealt with the one question we've got, somebody asking about accreditation.
Okay, I will go into that nearer the end. Okay, so building the value. What can they get only from you? And this is so important. And you guys all know that if you stand on the side of a ring, doesn't matter if it's the World Games, the Olympic Games, or, you know, a one-day event, if you stand in one place in the ring next to 8 other photographers, ultimately you're going to get very similar shots. So can you think sideways, and can you do a different view? Can you photograph a jump from a different angle? Who have you got on your contacts that may be able to help you? So this image to the left was at the Blair Castle, and it was the Europeans. And I did manage, because I knew the organizer, I managed to get a different angle, but I was focusing on the story of the women. And I knew that before going in. And this was the image I had in my head, because I was working with a brand and I was working with a magazine. So I knew that because I had this image, I can charge a premium for it, because it's exactly what they were looking for. But you'll also notice that I made sure we got the branding in with the I never know how to say this. The Longines, I think that's how you say it. But I made sure I got all the branding in. But it's also a really sweet moment with the girls, and the look of, phew, we did it, well done, they're all clammed together. But that's what I mean by taking a different view. Where can you go beyond the normal? Where can you step things up and start showing images that other people need in their portfolio, in their magazine, for their brand, the sponsor, the rider, for their website, for their social media? If you're the only one that has that image, you can then add value and add a premium onto it. So ask yourself, when you're doing any set of images, especially at events, what's the story behind the images you're taking? So are you going to walk through the lorry park, and let's just say that you want to photograph all the dogs that accompany the riders on events. And if you took an hour and a half on that event, walked through the lorry park and photographed each dog that accompanies the riders, and we all know there's bloomin' hundreds of them, then, and you know, they're sunbathing on the back of the lorries, they're sitting in the cab, they're in the back of the Range Rover, but it gives you a different story to talk about. You can blog about it, and you can approach magazines, and we'll talk about that in marketing, but you can approach magazines and say, this is the story I've come up with. You know, 80 lorries out of 150 in the lorry park had dogs with them. And these are some of the beautiful images that I captured of them having just as fun day as the horses. And ask yourself if there's a need for those images. And that's what I did when I joined Harry Mead's team. So we did it on a, he worked for me, I worked for him. There was no employment either way. I wasn't sponsoring him, he wasn't sponsoring me, he wasn't my ambassador. We were just creating a personal project together, but I knew that his story was going to be huge. And for any of you that don't know Harry Mead's story, in 2013, he smashed both his elbows on a rotational fall. And he was told there was up to a 90% chance that he wouldn't be able to compete professionally ever again. And within 1 year of him smashing his elbows, he was riding back at badminton, and he came third. And I joined Team Mead about 2 months before that happened, because I saw his rehabilitation and I saw the story going, and I wanted to be part of it. I thought it was an incredible feat. He's very close to his wife and his children and his father, who unfortunately is not with us anymore. but they all came together as a big team, and I wanted to capture just the hard work that went into that. So it was all from behind the scenes. So, and I knew there was going to be a need for those images. He was having so many interviews with magazines and journalists and newspapers that I knew that they'd want something different other than one image of him in the hospital or bandage up and another image of him either show jumping or cross country. I knew they'd want more than that. So I started working with them and creating more images. So for example, this is Harry's head groom, this is Jess, and this image was purchased for Grooms Network. I think they bought it for about £350. So they used it for online and in 2 magazines. And it really shows the connection, but this is what I do. This is why it's bespoke to me. I pinpoint connection between people and their horses. And Jess is so talented that she can run a yard of 16 horses and she never looks flustered, but she's always got time for individual horses. And that's why I wanted to capture. And this was in Ireland. It was at a show, but it's one of those moments that really sums Jess up. So I show the connection. It's, as I say, beautifully shot, if I do say so myself. But it shows my skill in what I'm offering. So it's not all about Harry, it's about the entire team. But I had to think about that before I went forward. What am I going to produce? Why am I going to produce that? And who is going to be interested in that? And I can only get this sort of image because I was backstage and allowed full access.
Just a quick question there.
Yeah.
From Rory. The question is, are your images journalistic or are they set up?
So a lot of mine are fly on the wall. They are as they're happening. But the great thing is as I built this relationship with Team Mead, if I needed a specific image, I was very comfortable with them saying, especially with Harry, because we had quite a lot to fulfill. But I would say, actually, that was a lovely moment. Can you do that again? And then I would compose it better. But to be honest, I was quick on my feet. I mean, that's why I was thinner, because I ran more. And I learned very quickly how to spot when moments were going to happen. And so many people would laugh at me because I wasn't at the end of cross country. I wasn't on the cross country field capturing the biggest jump for Harry, because I was always in the wash off or back at the lorry waiting for the horse to come back, because those are the images I wanted for the story. I wanted him coming back and celebrating with the horse, and the owner celebrating with the horse, and the big wash off and putting the bandages on his legs. That's what I was interested in. And I knew Harry could purchase the big jump on the cross country course if he needed it later. But there wasn't anyone else capturing the other side of it. So although they weren't set up, they were in my head as I was taking it, and I would correct if needed. So the extra you can do when you're working with a rider or a brand or a sponsor or a yard or a team, you want to go the extra mile. And in fact, I touched on this, Simon and I were just discussing, if any of you have got a quieter diary now, this is your opportunity to go and connect with a top rider or an up and coming rider, or maybe a rider that's just close to you that you're inspired by, but you have to have a connection. You have to want to tell their story, So I would go to Harry's home. I mean, I'd be there all the time, but we would set up 2 or 3 portrait shoots a year where I would photograph Harry with each of his horses, but in a styled shoot. So what I do now every day, I did with Harry and each of his horses. We would change his clothing so that he had his sponsors in each image, or, the entire set would make sure that we had all the sponsors in there somewhere. And we'd have a little bit of product placement. So he's sponsored by people like Land Rover, Porraget, Cordings of Piccadilly. So we'd make sure that the Land Rover was in there somewhere, in the mix. But the great thing about doing this was I was the only one who had these types of shots. So as Harry's story started to be picked up by journalists and newspapers, they obviously said, well, we're going to need some images. Have you got eventing images? Yes, of course I have. Go to Hannah Freeland. She also has behind the scenes. She has us getting ready for shows, and she's got some beautiful portraits of me. And, you know, depending on if he was talking to magazines or one of his sponsors, we would make sure that the gallery we showed them had their brand in placement. So they didn't need to send a photographer out to do the shoot with Harry. Harry then saved time on his yard because he was interviewed on a weekly basis, if not more, and that would have taken a photographer once a week doing a quick photo shoot with him. Whereas actually what happened is they just kept coming back to me and saying, have you got an image of this? Have you got an image of that? Can I have this? Can I have that? And that's why I got front covers, big feature images, newspaper images, and we got a lot of coverage, and it was very easy for everyone involved. I also made sure that I contacted every single one of his sponsors and made sure they knew that I was curating a big gallery of bespoke images that only I had, because I was allowed access to all the owners as well. They put on big, wonderful picnics at the bigger events, at 3-day shows. We would hire houses. You know, there's a lot that went into the Harry Mead eventing. And so I was capturing it all, but what it meant was I had this wonderful gallery that no one else had. And anyone can do this. You just need to pick a rider that has a story that connects with you, because a lot of this came from the passion I had for what he was achieving. You also need to make sure that whoever you work with is happy to recommend you. None of this would have actually worked is if Harry was contacted by a journalist, did a phone interview, then got talking about imagery, and if he said, yeah, no, send a photographer, that wasn't going to work for us. I needed him to want to, A, to save his own time, and B, I knew he'd want to promote my images. And that comes with having a really good relationship between Team Mead and me. And what we did, we had a very honest conversation about what it is that would help him out. And one of the things he said was, I do want carte blanche, if that's the right way of saying it. I'm sorry, I do make up words as well, so it might not even be a saying. But I want final say-so of all the images that are going out of me and my horses. And you can think, well, hang on a minute, they're my copyright if I want to take it. But actually what it meant was no matter what sponsor phoned me, what article, what newspaper, what magazine, didn't matter who contacted me, I knew that the images I was sending them had been signed off by Harry. And it meant that we didn't have to go back and forth and say, Harry, are you happy with them using this? It just meant that it was a very seamless, and it worked very well.
I was going to say, actually, just considering that, you could take that same lesson and apply it to anything. You could be photographing the next upcoming Lewis Hamilton.
100%.
You could be doing the same for a young dancer,
yeah,
a musician. So
yes,
whatever you don't, you know, that whole thing that you've said there could be applied to any type of event photography.
100%. And I think if you are focused on equestrian, remember how many disciplines there are and how many disciplines are not known. Now, funnily enough, we all take eventing as something very normal. In the UK, eventing is so normal. When I started traveling the world with eventers, we are the only people that understand eventing. If you try and speak to an American about eventing, especially 3-day eventing, they don't get it. They have no idea. It's why a lot of people focus on one discipline, the dressage or the show jumping or the racing or the vaulting or, you know, whatever it might be. Eventing is so misunderstood, which unfortunately is why there's not a lot of finance in eventing, because it's difficult to understand. You know, depending on which level you're at, show jumping is either last day or show jumping is before the cross country. You want high points in dressage or you want low points in dressage. You know, where does it all lie? So it's a tough discipline to get into, but if you can get into it and be the expert, you will be sought after, I promise you. So this is just another example. One of the things you need to do if you're going to take any inspiration from my route, which, you know, would be good if you know, it's why I'm here to say it, but you need to be creative with your shoots and try and capture something that not many people have seen. You know, lots of people have seen riders show jumping, doing the badminton cross country, being interviewed. You know, we've seen a lot of those images, but there's also the quiet at home images. And, you know, you've got to push those creative boundaries, get those photography skills flexed, because if you can offer something that no one else has, again, you can ask a premium and it will be valued highly. Okay, so let's talk about collaborations, how to connect with these riders. So there's the gorgeous Laura here, who I've also worked on a one-to-one basis with. You've got to pick your rider really well. And what I mean by that is they have to work for you as much as you're going to work for them. You need to have some sort of symmetry in the way you think about things. You know, if you're going to butt heads all the time, it's not going to work. You need to be able to rock up and have a decent conversation, and they need to trust you and you need to trust them. What I will say, and it's a bit of a warning, is they need to value photography. And I don't mean the £5 digital that sometimes, I will admit it, the professional riders who are at the top of their game do expect free images. And it's tough for us lot because we can't afford to give them for free. But what you can do is join a rider who will promote your business and get you value by their owners, by their sponsors, by magazines, by articles that are being written about them, and by events that they're attending. And maybe they join other organizations where they speak and they can recommend you to cover the event. You know, there's so many different networks that your riders will have, and you need to feed into those networks, but from a very trusted angle. Really dig down in what they bring to you. What's their value for your business? It cannot be a one-way street. So many of us, and hands up, I've been there, I did it. I wanted to work with this rider, and I suddenly realized after a couple of months, she was getting an awful lot of value out of it. I was getting nothing. And it's because I had not set my boundaries. I hadn't set a package, and I was being a bit airy-fairy about it. And I said, well, let's just see what happens. I needed to put very strict boundaries in place and tell them exactly what I was trying to achieve, what I expect from them, and what they should expect from me. So I also would implore you, if you can, depending on the discipline you're going into, try and find out a little bit about your rider, and potentially they've got a story. And as you know, Michael said earlier, it doesn't necessarily have to be an equestrian, but every human that is going to be a professional sports person has a story somewhere, and it can be beautifully told in images. And it might be that they have started with absolutely nothing, and they worked their socks off from being a groom to now a professional rider. Maybe they don't own any of their horses, but they ride for every single day, come rain or shine. Maybe they live in the stable block with their grooms. There's all sorts of stories that should be told in a beautiful way, and they will get picked up. And the other thing is, if you're going to work with a rider, make sure you have actual access to that rider. You can't collaborate with someone and then they say, oh yeah, but you can't come to that. Oh no, but there's no room for you there. Oh, but I don't want you coming to, I don't want you photographing that because that's, you know, that's the babies. You know, you've got to have all access, which is where you build the trust. And also make sure you're helpful to them, and that adds a lot more value. So, you know, that's why I created this gallery of images ready for magazines and articles, because that was very helpful to Laura. When I worked with Mary King, it was very helpful to her. But I always brought it back to what I offer them. I would, of course, capture the action. I get the dressage test, I get the show jumping, and I get the cross country. But ultimately, my goal was to get a beautiful portrait shoot of them at home with their horses relaxing. Getting ready at 4 a.m. I photographed so many sunrises while the lorry was being packed and the horses going on, and the leg bandages and the travel boots, you know, the tail bandages, and the grooms yawning and carrying 6 buckets and 2 saddles on her other arm. those are the sort of images that inspire people and get people talking and get people seeing your work and then paying a premium for it. Are there any questions, Michael, before I jump into?
Yeah, there is one actually, just to fit in with that.
Yeah.
Questions from Rory again. Have you ever had to walk away due to lack of rapport?
Yeah.
And so that's a sweet. I thought that's the answer we may come to out with your comments actually as they built up.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and my biggest advice is that I would always do a test shoot to see, you know, with Harry, I was ever so lucky. I was actually commissioned by a company. So while he was in recovery with his elbows, obviously he couldn't ride. And Harry is a shrewd businessman. Again, I don't know if that's the right word, but he's a clever businessman. And so while he couldn't ride, he could do course walks, and he could be hired and paid to do course walks. And it just so happened that in 2013, I was hired by an estate agent, I can't even remember them, Hamptons, to photograph Harry's course walk for Hamptons. And they had a big lunch, which was put on by Hamptons in the Gatcombe big tent. And then we did I think it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours course walk, where Harry walked them around the course and explained each jump, and they wanted it photographed. I am a little bit of a keen bean, and as I said, my confidence back then was not great. I was commissioned from 1 o'clock in the afternoon till 4, and I turned up at Gatcombe at 8:15, so I didn't want to be late. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do for these 5 or 6 hours that I've got free? I'll go and find Harry. Never met him before, was very excited to meet him, and thought this is a perfect opportunity because someone's actually paying me to be here, and I get to meet Harry Mead as well. And I got to his lorry about 9:15, and I actually didn't leave. I got on so well with them. They invited me straight in. They welcomed me. We got to know each other really well. And so when I was picking my story that I wanted to work with, I knew it would be a really good fit and that we gelled immediately. But I have absolutely come across riders who, and I tell you the thing that doesn't work is when they don't value photography. If they just don't, you know, photography is not for everyone. Not everyone holds it, that they would pay anything for it. You know, as with anything in life, some people shop in Waitrose because they value the service that they get in Waitrose. Some people poo-poo that and say, well, I can get exactly the same food at Tesco's and pay half price. It all depends what you value, and you must make sure your rider values your time, your expertise, your talent, and photography, that they would be willing to pay for it. Okay, so collaborating with brands and sponsors. Again, pick carefully. Try not to pick brands who, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear this evening, but who take the piss, basically. There are, we'll all know.
In event terms.
Sorry?
That's not swearing in event terms. And,
no, well, quite right, exactly. But we all know, we all know there's many, many brands out there and sponsors who will take every free image, potentially will steal images, and then say, oh, I didn't know, or well, it was on social media, so I assumed I was allowed to just copy it, paste it, and put on my own caption on it, and, you know, all sorts of nonsense. And they know what they're doing. So you need to investigate your brand. So again, working with Harry Mead, he came with a load of top sponsors. So I was incredibly lucky with things like that. You know, he came with Paul Roger, which you can see here. And I've got an ongoing relationship with Paul Roger still now. I still shoot for them. But it was because I was photographing something different, and they were able to use it in a way they haven't been able to before. So I would give them, they'd say, we want dirty tack. I want dirty boots on a clean horse. You know, and they would come to me with, I want a near miss, you know, something with on the cross country course where it looks like it's about to go wrong, but the rider saves themselves, that sort of thing. And they would come to me all the time with these either creative shoots that I hadn't shot yet, or something that might be on my hard drive. And again, I worked with Land Rover and Cordings and Equilibrium and lots of brands. And yes, there were a couple of brands that I connected with, and they definitely took the piss. And I did it once, and that was that, and we move on quickly. but you need to research your brand, see what sort of imagery they're putting out now. You'll definitely tell if they pay for professional images. If you can look at their Instagram feed, their Facebook, their website, and it looks like they actually value photography and they're commissioning a photographer, then definitely get on board with them, because another photographer's already done the hard work for you. You need to, when you're collaborating with a brand or sponsor, you need to create a very solid package. So, for example, I worked with, let's say, Paul Roger, and they commissioned me to go up on one day of Burley and to get one cross-country jump. That's all they wanted, was one image of Harry doing a cross-country jump with the Paul Roger branding behind the jump. So if you miss it, it's a lot of pressure, but hey. And they also wanted me to photograph an hour's worth of people in the champagne tent. And they would pay me £1,200 for that, plus my expenses. But that's because I had a very solid package that I was offering them. They knew I'd get the shot, and they liked the style that I was shooting in. And we built up a relationship. Now, if you'd asked me a year before I was commissioned that, whether I could get paid, well, if I could get paid anything to attend an event, I would have said, don't be silly. You go to an event, you take the images and you see what comes of it. But I built up this network and collaboration so that I was the only person they could come to, because someone like Paul Roger does have a marketing budget. And they say, well, that's okay. We know that from Hannah, we'll get all the images of the tent we need, all the images of people mingling and drinking our champagne on the setting of Burley, and we know that we'll get the right image of Harry Mead over our jump. So that I ticked every box, and I made sure it was no fuss for them. I added value because I would always take care of my own accommodation. I'd take care of all my own timings. I'd make sure I was early for the day so that if there was a beautiful sunrise or sunset at Burley, I'd capture that for them as well near the tent, because all those things make sure you're booked for the following year. And that is going above and beyond, and only do that if you've got the time. But if you think of all the things that would make someone say, I don't care how much it costs, I've got to have it. Because that, as photographers, is our aim. You want all your clients to say, I don't care how much that costs, I've got to have it. And that's why you need to separate yourself and really show what you can do. Where's your creativity? And ongoing work is fantastic. And there's so many, I say, fingers in pies that you can have with sponsors and brands of riders. You know, I was contacted by Land Rover, and they said, we're kitting out the VIP tent at Burley. We'd love some images, but your images are slightly more artistic. Could we purchase some for you? And I said, yes, are you going to frame them? And they said, well, I don't know if we've got time to frame them. So I gave them a price. I said, how many do you need? And they said 6. And I said, okay, how about these 6 images? Yes, they're great. I said, well, I tell you what, if you need them framed, it's this much per framed image, and I'll get them delivered straight to the VIP tent in Burley. Now, because I did it all for her, the marketing director said, yeah, that's great, go for it. So they spent a lot more with me because I was willing to go above and beyond and just get it done for her. She didn't need to go and find a framers or a printers. It was just done for her. And these guys have big budgets. So there's lots of avenues you can take. It's not just photographing the rider. You need to keep finding out all these other networks that are surrounding, you know, riders or sponsors or brands that you can keep feeding into.
Quick question for you, Hannah.
Of course.
What do you suggest to do with brands that do take the mick?
So the way I dealt with it was, I didn't want to be slowed down by anything. If they really have taken the piss and it's cost you money, then I would seek legal advice. If you're part of an organisation, normally that comes with some sort of legal advice help. But honestly, it was normally social media. I didn't want to be slowed down. And what I would do is I would take a screenshot and I would post it on my stories or my Facebook page. And I will say, absolutely honoured that, I won't name names, but I had a very famous boot company steal my images of Emily King, and they Not only did they cut through the bottom of the boot, which is sacrilege, straight through the ankle, because they cut my logo off. So all I did was repost it and say, honoured that well, I've said it now, but honoured that that boot company would like to use my images as their front campaign, and I got a pair of boots in the post with an apology letter. So, you know, you got to take a bit of, do I want to spend time dealing with this? Am I ultimately going to get something from this? Maybe, maybe not. And where does your time best lie? And my time is always best marketing my business, making new connections, picking up the phone and connecting with new people. It is not phoning someone and saying, you've used my image, I'm now going to send you a £90 bill, because they'll just say, I didn't realize, we'll take it down. You know, it's unlikely you'll ever see the money. I like to stay in a very positive mindset. And maybe I'm the fool for doing it, but I do.
All right, and just Phil said, did the boots fit?
No. No, and they were really uncomfy, so don't anyone spend any money with them. I gave them to my sister. I did. I was so angry by that point that I didn't want them. But you know, hilariously, I was at Blair Castle and it had just happened, and I was with a very influential lady and 3 of her friends, and they said, oh, there's the such and such stand, let's go and try their boots on. And I said, well, I wouldn't. Told them the story, and they said, well then we'll not, then we'll go and look at the Dubarrys. And so actually, I mean, you know, whatever, they can afford to lose 4 pairs of boot sales, but at least I felt that paid for the image. Okay. Oh, we're going backwards again. Marketing. So I think everyone in here is professional photographer. Am I right in saying that? Yeah. So you all have social media channels, you all have a platform, maybe a website, maybe a blog, but your social media images need to, 1, show your best always. If you question an image, if you think, it's okay, but don't post it. If you go to someone's social media channel, they'll look at the top 6 images and make their decision. Maybe they'll look at the top 3. And if your top 3 images is one that you're, I'm not sure it's great, don't post it. You also need to keep it really simple, really show what you're about. So if you take this image of Harry here, now Harry and I had about 10 minutes spare, and I said to him, let's just do some portraits of you gearing yourself up for the cross country, just having a bit of a quiet moment in the lorry. But if you see this in my portfolio, if you see this on my social media, you'll get what I do. I'm going behind the scenes. I'm getting something a bit different. I'm not capturing them with just their helmet on and on the back of a horse. And also, I've got access. And that's what images like this tell people who come onto your portfolio or your social media. So really look at your grid and ask yourself, what am I showing I can do? What am I showing I'm the expert in? Why should people value me over everyone else? Make sure your captions, now I'm not going into what's right and wrong for getting to the top of Google, for the best of Instagram to build your numbers, but I know that when I get to the point in your post, now it can be a long post, but get to the point. And you know what it's like when you're reading someone's Instagram or Facebook, you may well start reading it and think, what? No, oh, it's all a bit airy-fairy for me, whatever. And you might double tap to like the image. But you do want to think, well, what are you actually trying to say? Biggest advice I can give anyone for social media is, why does your client care? When you're posting an image, ask yourself, who are you trying to attract to your business? And why do they care about this image you've just posted? So like this image on the left of Harry, I would talk about the amount of access I have, the trust that we've built up as photographer and client, the quiet moments that riders have before they go out onto the battlefield of the cross country. You know, all these things that other riders would say, yeah, I definitely have a moment in my lorry where I think, Jesus, okay, I've got to do this. other brands would look and say, yeah, those are the sort of images we need for our website, for our ambassadors, or maybe for the VIP tent, because that's the sort of image that invokes some sort of story and some sort of emotion. And also know your skills. So as I said before, my skills are with people. I get on with people. I love small talk, big talk. I love getting to know someone. I love getting to know their story. I love getting to know their horses. And I have fun with people. I'm not very serious, but I've found that my confidence comes from making friends. And so if I can make someone else feel calm and confident about themselves by talking to me, then I'm going to get the best of them through my images. Any questions before we move on, Michael?
No, we're clear at the moment.
Excellent. So another thing you can do is PR yourself. So it doesn't always have to be about your rider. So this was in Your Horse and Country back in 2015, I think. And I had connected with the editor of the magazine, and we were walking through the shops at Badminton. And I said to him, do you know, I think I'm going to walk about 40 miles by the end of Badminton. And he said, no, you're never going to walk 40 miles. And we did the mileage around the cross-country course, and I had 4 cross-country walks to cover. And then obviously the amount of walking you do over the 5 days while you're on the event. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll buy you a pair of the Ariat boots, we'll put them to the test, and then we'll write about it, about you. And it was 45 miles we tracked later. And when we went to the Ariat stand and told them the story, they actually gifted us the boots and said, as long as you, so you can see at the bottom, it says, to buy, please visit Colne Saddlery. And Colne Saddlery gifted the boots to us so that they got a mention in the article in the magazine. But it was all a big collaboration. And it just so happened that we came up with the idea while at Badminton and said, wouldn't it be funny to see if brand new boots could survive a 45-mile. I mean, I was lucky that the boots were comfortable, because that was on day one. And if they hadn't have been, I wouldn't have been happy. I would have had bleeding feet. But always think outside the box. Think of something of interest to who you want to gather into you. And people like to be inspired. They like to, you know, open a magazine and say, that's my photographer. That's, you know, they want more than the average Joe, if that's the right saying. And they need to see your name over and over and over again to really build value and to spend money with you. If they've seen you at a show, they've seen you in a magazine, they've seen you recommended by a top rider, they've seen you've had images, you know, bought by Land Rover or whatever, all these things add up to, I'm going to spend some serious money with that person, because they're going above and beyond to be creative and a little bit different. It's all about carving your own slice of this eventing or racing or show jumping cake. You need to stand out and be you. Okay, little cutie patootie. She is so much older now. Pricing. Who on earth knows how to price for event images? So I'm not talking here about any of you who spend 16 hours at an event photographing every rider, and God bless you for doing that. I did it for about a year, and that's why I changed tactic. I just was like, no, I can't do this. It's going to kill me. And it was every weekend, and every Friday was gone, and every Monday and Tuesday for editing was gone, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up. So I'm not talking pricing for those sort of things. I'm talking pricing about what I've discussed this evening. The first thing I'm going to say to you is a client will never, ever pay you any more than you ask. So if you don't feel confident about your pricing and you go in and say, well, I mean, what's your budget? They're going to come back to you and say the budget's 30 quid. Even top magazines have told, and I mean top magazines have told me their budget's 50 quid for a front cover. And I said, then you need to get a new budget manager, because that is bullshit. So don't ask them what their budget is, tell them what your price is. What value are you putting on that image? So let's just take this image to the right. That's Harry Mead's daughter at that age, having her Chris on a pole rocher who was sponsoring Harry Mead with his lorry in the background. but that image holds value. No one else has got it. But if I dither-dather about the price and I'm not confident, then they're gonna, it puts people off. You also want to ask yourself, what does your price say about your work? So if you're £5 an image, and then it stands next to, let's say I'm £90 an image, the person who's purchasing, do they just assume my images are better? Do they assume I'm overinflated and I've got a big ego? But the assumption is normally the more expensive, something's better. And if they value photography, they will go for the more expensive because they will assume it is better. That maybe I've got better access. Maybe I've got even more available than the other person. And they will start to think, and there's no ongoing relationship because they will start to think, how is this person making any money if they're charging that? Whereas everyone's free to say, no, thank you, that's a ridiculous price. Okay, and that's why I'm going to move on to the next person, the next sponsor, the next brand, the next collaboration, because I know people are willing to pay it because they paid me to do it. So be very strong in your pricing. Make sure it's written down. It's very clear. When I say what's included, what I mean is the licensing. So with photography, if you haven't been commissioned to do the shoot, and so with Harry Mead, I would go to events, shoot for them, and then we would contact anyone who was interested in images. So I needed to make sure that my licensing was in place. If you're being commissioned to do a shoot, then it's a different pricing structure. And I would always include the images that I shot for that. They'd commission me for the day and they got the shots that I got on that day, edited, ready to go, high res. And again, you can negotiate a license. So sometimes I would license all the images ready for print, or if they didn't want to pay my full day's rate commission, then they would only have an online marketing license and they needed to purchase print license separately. But it meant that if they only wanted online images, the likelihood is I could do 2 or 3 different clients a day. When it's going into print, a lot more has to go into it. It's just nature of the beast. So make sure you've got your licensing understood. If they're going for print, it needs to be more money. If it's going for digital, it's obviously less. Make sure you've understood your extra costs. There's a photographer who is highly talented. She's super, super talented. And she was covering a 3-day event and she was running around like a blue ass fly. And she was trying to capture all the prize giving, every winner. And then she was trying to predict the top 10 riders who would be placed in the top 10 positions of each class. So she was capturing, and there was only one of her. And then she was capturing for the event's social media channel. And then the event wanted enough images for their website to promote the following year. And I said to her, listen, I hope you're being paid well for this. And she went, oh yeah, 50 quid a day. And that included the images. And she said, yeah, but it's only cost me £10 a day to be here. And I said, well, how much is your insurance for your kit? What's the fuel in your car? What about the 3 days you've taken out of your life? Let alone valuing any of the images that you're producing. And that's what I mean by extra cost. Don't forget that if you've got to stay in a hotel overnight, if you've got to bunk up with a friend, we all need wet weather gear, don't we, just in this bloody country? But it all costs money and those extra costs have to be covered. And with your pricing, if you get it right and you are strong and confident with it, people will keep coming back to you because they expect what they pay and they pay for what they expect. It's as simple as that. You've got to be their go-to guy, and they know that each beautiful image you've shot that's something different no one else has is going to cost them X amount of money, and they're happy to pay for it because no one else is going to have that image. Okay, so I do want to give you just an example of what I can see laughter going on. What's going on? Is it okay? You're okay. Okay. So this is one of the curated images. This was a bit of fun that we were having really late in the evening. We were all so done by this point, But I said to him, while he's got the Cordings bucket, the Cordings is a gentleman's clothing brand. They don't actually have that many spaces available for beautiful horse images. They can only use 1 or 2 really, because they don't do riding gear. So, you know, but this is the sort of image that looks great on their social media. But I wanted to give you an example of what my prices were. So I was £1,200 minimum for a day rate at an event plus my expenses. And that included all the images for them to use for their marketing. And it would include 10 of those images with a print license as well. But that was a print license for them. So it meant that if they were doing a brochure or a product, they could use the image. But if they were doing an advert in a third-party magazine, they did need an extra image. So all this pricing takes a lot of thinking through, because there's extra levels to these licenses. But once you've done it, and you look so professional understanding the different levels. I was £350 per image with a print release. So if a magazine wanted an image like this to go with a feature, it was 350 quid. Or if a sponsor wanted it, so if Cordings wanted it or Paul Roger, it was 350 quid if it was in print. And if it was for digital, so for their website, or if it's for a digital brochure or for social media, it was £90 an image. I also, as I said, sold frames to a lot of sponsors and brands. And I had 7 front covers and many, many, many magazine features. And I joined a couple of magazines who would send me out to do my lifestyle portrait shoots with other riders, because they understood I was capturing something different. So I made a bit of a name for myself there as well.
Just a quick,
how are we doing?
Hannah. How do you check that sponsors or organisations don't use the images without the correct licence? How do you monitor usage? I would imagine.
So if it was, you need to build up a trust with it. If they do, I was very upfront with them and said, I'm not going to police my images, but if I find that you've used this image, and it would be in writing, if I found that you've used this image in print, I will simply send you an invoice and expect that invoice to be paid within 7 days. And because that was in writing, that's, you know, and we signed a contract. So they knew, they signed it. At the time I had 17 hats. So they had to sign it digitally through my studio management software. And so, but again, you know, I price my work that really, that's why I price it at £90 for digital image. So if they did use it in print, I've still been paid 90 quid. You know, if they spend £350 an image and they use it for a slightly different license, I'm happy with the money that I was earning. So I didn't have to feel resentful of any clients. And that's where I think, you know, when I very first started and was charging £5 for digital and £15 for something in print, as soon as someone bought a digital and then put it in print, I'd feel so resentful of it. And then I'd have to spend my time chasing them for £10 difference. You know, I'd say, well, where's the other £10? And it all feels like a great waste of time, and I feel very resentful to it. So I changed my pricing structure that I always got paid. And if they, you know, misunderstood the license, then it was very clear in the email I sent afterwards. But I will say, no one ever did, ever. So it's all about being clear with your pricing. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Excellent. Okay, so showing you're the expert, again, this puts you on a bit of a pedestal, but the things I found were certainly solving the issues. So how did I ensure I was going to get the shots, let's say, that Paul Roger commissioned me for? So I would spend time looking at the course, making sure that I had, you know, if I needed to get from here to here with the horse on the course, which I did once because I had to get Harry coming under the bridge and then run across Burley and get him coming out of the woods and over a very big drop jump. But I worked out that if I piggybacked a 6'4" guy who could run like the wind, then I could do it. So, but we did 2 test runs as well. And my client doesn't need to know that, but what they do need to know is that I've solved any issues that might arise. I always do a course walk and I always make sure the position is good. And I always positioned myself for something a little bit different as well. Always find solutions. And when I say find solutions, if you can make friends with the organizer, with the press secretary, with anyone who can help you out, if you can help them, they will help you. And that helps you find solutions. If you need to be, you know, at a prize giving in a prime spot because you've been commissioned to photograph Princess Anne, then make friends with the person who organizes that setup so that they can say, right, they can get you in place, and then they invite the other photographers in. And it's all about making those connections. Show that you're highly professional, and that is having your licensing in place, that's having your insurance in place, your wet weather gear if you want it. I've ended up using shopping bags because I've forgotten my wet weather gear and doesn't look great, but you know, it did the job at the time. But all these things add up to, I want to pay that person because all her ducks are in a row. And you'll hear Emily and I say that all the time. We say ducks in a row, but it is true that if I get a phone call, I follow up immediately with an email, and then I follow up with my pricing, then I follow up my licensing, and we have another phone call. And so they feel very looked after and very nurtured, which shows you as the expert. Okay, your portfolio. This is a bit like your social media. Make sure it's clear, clean and easy to understand. If someone looks at your website, your portfolio, whether it's on your Instagram, your Facebook, your website, your blog, what are they commissioning you for? Is it very clear the type of images they're going to get if they pay you to go and do an event? Or if you sign up with a rider, is that rider going to think, I'm so excited to work with this person. He or she is really going to capture something different and it's going to be exciting. Who's going to connect with your portfolio? You need your target client. So something like this image shows a lot of big lorries. And therefore, and this was Belton, it was actually the last year of Belton, it rained, it snowed, and it was hot sunshine all in one weekend. It was bizarre. But it will connect with event organisers who want to encourage international and high-level professionals to their event, because that's what the lorries are showing, and a nice stately home at the back. And where's the value in your portfolio? Are they going to look at your portfolio now? If someone went to your website right now, would you get £90 an image from your portfolio? Would they look at your portfolio and say, this guy or girl is on it? They know what their craft is, they know where their creativity lies, and they nail it every time. And your portfolio doesn't need to be larger than 10 images, but it should be 10 whopping, beautiful images. What can they only get from you? So go back to your USP. What is it that you can capture that no one else can? And it might be connection between horse and rider. It might be real dramatic action. It might be water shots. All these things. You might have a great understanding of light. You might use artificial light, obviously not at events, but for your private commissions. Make sure you're putting what you can capture right in their face, right at the start. And obviously in your portfolio, only show your best work. You're better off showing 4 beautiful images than you are showing 40 that are mediocre. This is one of those images, and I sprinted across Badminton to get this image, but this is one of those images that was right place, right time, because I had the right contacts. It was Harry's wife that phoned me and said, Claire Balding is interviewing Harry. It's a last minute, it's on the BBC. Can you go and capture it? And a load of newspapers and Badminton bought this, and obviously Harry used it. But it's just one of those fun images that not a lot of people get to see, that sort of behind the scenes. And then accreditation, it is not that difficult, but it is, and I'm sorry if I've spelt that wrong. It is not that difficult to get, but you do need to get it. And I'm sure all of you here tonight have gone through the accreditation process. But I will say I've always been accredited for Badminton, for Burley, for Blair, for Gatcombe, for the World Games and the European Games. And let me tell you that the European Games in Germany, Harry rang me about midnight because he'd only just found out, and we had about 7 days before the European Games, and he was on the British team, and he obviously wanted me there because we were doing the story, and the accreditation had closed about 4 months previous. And luckily my other half speaks fluent German, so we wrote a very nice email, and I absolutely told them the truth and said, this is the story I'm doing. I'm following one rider. I'm hugely respectful of rules and regulations. I've been accredited here, here, and here. I know how to follow the rules. I will not get in other people's way. I know where to wear my jacket, da, da, da. Is there any possibility of getting accreditation? They gave it to me straight away, which is very sweet. But more than that, they gave me the free pass for parking in Aachen. They gave me the free food vouchers and the drinks vouchers. And let me tell you, in Aachen, the drinks vouchers includes the free cocktail bar. That was a huge win, a massive one. So and also when I did badminton, I made such friends with the guy, Peter, who organizes the press, that he very kindly in 2014, when Harry came third after breaking his elbows, which is this image here, he actually gave me the royal box to shoot from, because the royals weren't there that year, and as long as I stood to the side of it, he said you'll get because I didn't go into the ring. And they also gave me a groom's pass for one day so that I could capture at the stables, because I'd proved myself to be I didn't overstep the mark ever. So they will bend over backwards for you if you bend over backwards for them and you're polite and you're friendly and you don't break the rules. So that, I think, is that. So before we go on to the Q&A, which if there's any questions, that'd be great. But I know I have overdone the time. By 8 minutes, I do apologize. But any of you that want to know more about me or Emily Hancock, that I run the training barn with, we've got studios in the New Forest and Bath, and this is my studio here in Bath. We do one-to-one bespoke mentoring. That can be anything. It can be event photography all the way through to fine art photography. We do bespoke mentoring on business marketing as well. We do group training. So we've got the Shoot, Shadow and Shine course when we can hold that. But at the moment, we're not holding any in-person group courses because it's just not safe enough yet. And we have our 3 online courses, which can all be found on the Training Barn website. But we make sure that we focus on making your business a success. So are there any questions before we all go and get a glass of wine?
What Hannah's actually just said there is actually what I would normally have said at the beginning. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Hannah last year near the back of Blandford. I think it was
last year, yeah.
And then I met Hannah and Emily again at the SWPP show in January. And again, I met Emily at the BIPP AGM last year, where she's one of the directors. And Hannah's also, what was really interesting and is the fact that I saw Hannah's A panel last year.
Yeah.
It was. And it's the eye for picking out things, and she did things that I looked at and thought, well, I would never have thought of that. And I think that was the amazing thing, was just getting this introduction to somebody that could pick out things that you weren't really looking at, that she's walking around with a knowing eye. And in what I would call a fairly typical stable yard. I wouldn't say it's anything special. I wouldn't say it's in a lovely location, but I wouldn't say you go in there and say this is the top eventing yard anywhere.
No.
But Hannah went round and then picked out a number of places where she went, look, you could do this. And then as soon as you sort of did the old hold your hand up and do this or this and put the crop out, you can see what Hannah was talking about. And it is a well-trained eye.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to think now who's just. Martha says she's done one of your courses, and I certainly signed up and bought the online course, and a lot of it I knew, but like everything else, it's the little bits that I didn't know with the real value.
Yeah, isn't that the great thing? I mean, let's face it, tonight I'm sure everyone sat listening to me has nodded along and thought, yeah, no, I've done that, I've connected with a rider before, or I've shot for a brand. And but the point, hopefully it sparks. I always think if I join a webinar, I join a talk, or I go on a course, I want to take 3 things away from it. As long as I've got 3 things that I've gone, interesting, I might try that, then I'm a happy camper and I've not wasted my time. And most of training, most of mentoring is actually solidifying something you already know, or giving you the confidence or the foundations or the formula to go and do something that you already know is out there, but you just think, how do you do that? And I have to be very honest with you all, is when I joined the Me team, I really thought that I would get a couple of blog posts out of it. Genuinely thought that's what I'll get from this, is that I'll have a nice story. And if I can manage to get to badminton and capture from maybe some of the stables stuff, and actually I just got full access to Everett, to the owners, you know, and when he came third, those images of the owners celebrating and everyone who had worked so hard for Harry's rehabilitation to get the horse to badminton and then to come third, it really was a dream come true. So, you know, I think talks like this hopefully are to inspire you guys just to take a couple of things away and think, hey, why, give it a go. I've got a rider down the road. Let's just see what happens.
So I think the really important thing is that you could have taken the images away from horses and you could have taken the stories away from horses, but you could have taken the content and applied it and striped it across a hell of a range of other subjects.
Yes.
And that's what I'm taking away from this is, you know, you can apply the knowledge to many aspects, and really appreciate your time, Hannah. It's good of you to give up an evening for us. Thank you very much for that. If you don't mind, just for 10 minutes, if Simon opens up the mics, you'll get the strangest and weirdest questions coming out at you.
Go for it. Go for it. Be kind, everyone.
So just while he's doing that, say just pass on. Really appreciated.
Not at all. Not at all. My pleasure. It's a nice group. I like this one. Who's got a question?
You've not met us before. That's the problem.
No.
Hannah, do you do studio lighting portraits of horses?
No, I use all natural light for mine. So if we've got, the only time I ever postpone is if it's actually wet and raining. If it's a cloudy day, then I use the dramatic clouds of the grey. But no, I don't use any artificial light. I know how to use my flash.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I don't. If you gave me proper lighting with battery packs and a horse, yeah, it would take me a while to learn my setup.
Okay.
Thank you for tonight. How do you get accredited? I've tried to get into badminton and that kind of thing and not had any luck because I haven't had like a magazine or something.
Yeah, so so I contacted a local magazine to badminton, Your Horse and Country, and I said, do you have a professional photographer? So this was when I had come away from the riders and I wanted to try collaborating with a magazine and brand. I said, do you have a professional photographer who's willing to capture it? But this is how I do it. I don't just walk the course. And he said, my God, we've been looking for someone like you. What the difference you could do for me, though, is that I can sell advertising space after badminton using your images for the sponsors, and we'll make a list of who wants their images. So it could be on a saddle pad of one of their riders. It could be their trade stand. And we just went through badminton, tick, tick, tick. But I got a magazine on board, and then I could put in that I was being published and paid by a magazine.
Thank you. That's
not a problem. Anyone else?
Okay, I have another one. What do you enjoy the most about your job?
Meeting people, hearing their stories, meeting people, seeing them. You know, when I do private commissions now of people with their horses at home, and you know, it's never fail that when you turn up, people will be a little bit anxious, they're a bit really nervous. They're always more nervous about what their horse is going to do. And so I'll spend a good 20 minutes, half an hour chatting to them, getting to know the horse. And I really show them, oh, that's sweet. I really show them that while I'm talking to the horse, that I understand horses. So I will always approach a horse with respect, with boundaries. I've had mares. My mare is now 24 and she's a nutter. She's an ex-racer. And so I really understand that mares in particular, like, whoa, you can't just walk up to me. Give me a second to know who you are. But in showing my clients that I understand that, and then, you know, I'll run my hand down their neck and I will tell them that their horse is really beautiful. They've turned their horse out really. So build their confidence up. And that's the bit I love the most, is seeing them switch to, this is all right. I'm feeling pretty good about this. And And I've spent a lot of time learning how to style outfits for shoots really well. And it's not always the outfit that would look good in my portfolio. It's the outfit that will make them feel their best self. And that's what I can put together. And as soon as they put that first outfit on, and of course you compliment them and you compliment the horse. And I start in a fairly easy location, and then gradually get harder and harder and harder because they're getting more and more relaxed and confident. So if I'm doing a multiple image with, say, 3 or 4 horses, a couple of dogs, I'll make sure that we either do it first and get it out the way, or we leave it to the end where everyone's chilled out. But I also listen to the horse's character to understand if it's going to be a big image and you've got 2 flighty horses, then leave it to the end so that they've done lots of walking, they've heard lots of good girl, good boy, and they're kind of over it by the end, and then they're a bit more calmed down. If you've got quite subdued horses, do the group shot first and jeer them up a bit because they're stood together, there's dogs, and they're like, oh, okay. Whereas actually they'll go even more downhill throughout the shoot. I think I answered your original question, but as I said, I go off on a tangent.
No, that was amazing. Really, really good. I totally agree. Like, bouncing off people it's really good.
Yeah, it's lovely building. I feel like I build friendships every time I meet a new client, and that's a really special thing. There's not many people that get to do this job and, get to have fun with horses and like-minded people.
Definitely.
Thank you. Any others? No? I think I might have answered everyone as I went through. I hope it was useful to you all this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I try not to talk too fast, but I always have a lot to say.
I don't know if Brian made his comment, but I've got it on the chat. He says, I love the fact that you do the story of the rider event rather than just the sports images. To me, that is much more of an interesting concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That was my comment. It's definitely, the story it's a USP for you, rather than being a sports photographer. And no offense to any sports photographers that are here. The story is really what makes it, and I would imagine that's where your clients, e.g. the magazines, the feature writers, etc., that's what they're looking for, because they can go to any number of photographers, to get the jump images or whatever.
Yeah.
But the story is unique, and that's what gives you your value.
Yeah, it's really carving out your own USP. It's one of the reasons when I sat down and thought, how am I going to make this work for me and my business? And as I said to Martha, one of the things I favor in this business is connecting with people. And so I thought, well, if I can build friendships with not only Harry, but his wife and his children, and then his team, and then his owners, and then his sponsors, and then everyone else that's connected, the farrier and the back, I still have lunch with his chiropractor, because you get really friendly with people, and they allow you to see a different side to them. And, when someone's treating a horse in the stable, if you've not built up any rapport and you're clicking away, you can imagine they're like, you're tensing the horse up. This is driving me, but you can't. So I would have a big conversation with them before, and I'd become friendly with them. And then you get, you say, well, actually, what are you going to do next? And they'd say, I'm going to manipulate the neck round. And because they're willing to work with you, that you can then get better positions, and you can create even more of a story. So
all good business is built on relationships.
100%, which is why with my portrait photography business, I'd say 99% of my business comes through shows and influencers. It's through recommendation. So I've got my minions working for me, recommending me and telling their network to commission me, which is exciting.
Another question from Rory in here, which I missed, was if a client pays you £1,200 for a day, do you also send individual images to others, commercial riders, etc.?
So they'll have a 3 months exclusivity on it, so that double images don't start turning up in magazines and whatnot. So if they commission me for the day, they are their images for 3 months exclusive. They can extend that for not very much, because basically if someone's willing to pay me 1,200 quid to get out of bed and shoot at an event, I'm happy for them to have all the images and they never see the light of day again. However, I put a 3-month exclusive on it. They understand that. By the time 3 months is over, they'll either contact me and say, could you please not sell 118 and 192 because we've used them as our product images. And obviously you don't want those duplicated anywhere else, but otherwise feel free to offer them out to your rider, the other sponsors, that sort of thing.
The reason I was asking that question is that I was lucky only once ever where somebody employed me to go to an event and take some photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was following their brief during that day, I took other shots, you know, while you were waiting for something to happen.
Yes.
I took other shots of other people's stands and other things like that. Now, I wasn't charging 1,200 quid for the day, and I did actually ask the original commissioner, and they had no problem. I said, look, I have these other images that are nothing to do with you. Is that okay? But another photographer told me I shouldn't have asked them. That's why
That's
I
how you
asked
build a
the question.
relationship.
Yeah.
That's exactly how you, if you're open and honest with someone. I agree with you that if you've got some downtime and you see something that should be captured or it can create financial help to your business, you're going to take that shot. As long as you fill your brief for your client's not going to have a problem with you taking a few other images of other riders, and you never know, they might want them as well, and you've gone above and beyond.
Okay.
But I have, there's absolutely no problem. I'm always open and honest with my clients. I think if you try and, what is it, smoke and daggers? I think if you, yeah, I tell you, cloaks and daggers, that's smoke and daggers. Smoke and mirrors, there you go, I mixed two metaphors. People appreciate openness and just an easy communication. You know, when I collaborated with Equilibrium, it was because I followed William Fox Pitt. I was commissioned to do a private shoot at his yard by another brand, and they were sending a product from Germany and it never turned up. So I sat at his yard for the first hour, and then I said to William, look, you get on with your day, and when it arrives, we'll slot back in. So I looked around his yard and I said, who are your sponsors? And he said, actually, one I would love to give back a little bit to is Equilibrium. And I'm friends with William anyway. So I shot just a few of their boots in a locker and then a few of the boots on the horse while he was training outside. And I sent them to Equilibrium and I said, I've shot these of William today. Wondered if you'd be up for doing a collaboration shoot. And they built the relationship from there. And we've worked together ever since.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sorry, one question. How did you transform collaboration to paid work?
So it's the value has to be there right from the start. So for Equilibrium, I'll give you so to follow on from that story, I said, I've got these images of William. I'm happy for you to use 3 of them if you'd like, but if you'd like all of them, it's, I don't know, it was 150 quid or something for, you know, because I'd done it while I was waiting for another product. And they said, oh, these are great. And they're at William's home and you can see they're at his yard. These are just what we're looking for. So I had the initial contact. I then phoned her back up about a week later and I said, would you be up for doing a collaborative shoot? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if I get an equine portrait shoot booked, are you willing to give me some boots or some, so we did cross-country boots, gel and travel boots. And I said, I can feature them in a lifestyle portrait shoot to give you some other images. There's no charge for the shoot because I was doing the shoot anyway, but there'll be £150 per image if you love them. And she said, well, I won't send you the boots. I'll come to the shoot with you and I'll style the boots on the horse. But I think that's a wonderful idea. And so that's what we did going forward. And they spent a lot of money with me, but it's because they'd only had images of horses jumping, wearing the cross-country boots at the front. So they had that image. What they didn't have is a horse walking beautifully with their owner through a nice yard with the boots on. And my client was happy as Larry because she was given all the boots that the horse wore for the shoot. So she had lots of new boots. But that's how you turn a collaborative into a paid client. But you build up that trust and you show them why you're different. And I always say to people, if I'm trying to get a new rider, or if I'm trying to get a new brand, I always give them something first. So I say to them, let me show you what I can do, and then we'll move forward. But I always like to prove myself first, but tell them the value. And I always use the word gift, never free. I always say, I'm gifting this to you. It's worth £1,000, but I'd love to show your business what I can produce for you on a regular basis. And once they go, okay, so that's £1,000, we can afford to do that every other month. And then you've got regular work coming in, but you have to be different. You can't be run of the mill.
So you essentially, you're using paid work to come up with speculative ideas.
Most of the
to bring in other customers.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a paid client I would do that for. It would probably be a creative shoot or a portfolio shoot.
Right.
Paid clients are always kept very private.
Okay.
I mean, unless you have a paid client who you know would love the opportunity. I've done it with Ariat. You know, that was a creative shoot that I phoned Ariat and said, I've got a creative shoot coming up. I've just done the recce of the yard. It's a really top, smart dressage yard. And the girl is absolutely stunning. Do you want to send me a pair of your boots? And anyway, that escalated so that we did an online competition. So I shot the shoot, I shot the images. They bought the images. They gave the girl a pair of the boots for free to say thank you for modeling in them. And then online, we did another collaboration, a competition to win the boots and a Hannah Freeland photography photo shoot of them wearing the boots. So Ariat got another set of images of the winner, and then the winner spent money with me after the shoot as well. So there's so many opportunities. You've just got to keep snowballing and drinking coffee a lot. Are there any other questions?
Hannah, in your first year with Harry,
Yes.
and even in your first few months, would I be right in assuming that that was an investment, that initially that there wasn't a whole heap of money coming in from that?
Yeah. I was really lucky because Harry's rehabilitation, and within 2 months of working together, he came third at badminton, and that's where it kicked off. So I was incredibly lucky, but I would always say the investment will be your time and effort. And once you've put that in and you've become a trusted part of the team, that's where you can start elevating the cost, the money coming back. But if it doesn't come back to you, reassess the relationship. Don't be afraid to say this doesn't work for me or my business. Be very clear about if it's not working for you, you can move on.
Okay. Okay. But try not to leave any enemies as you do it.
Absolutely. I know. Always have a drink first, have a natter. Tell them you're going in a different direction, and then shoot for their competition. Are there any other questions? No?
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being so kind to me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Really revealing. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Hannah, for a different insight.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And I'll speak to, hopefully I'll see you all at the photography show in 2023 or something.
That'll be the next one then.
Yeah. Well, everyone stay safe, and it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks very much again.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.